What do you think is the number one leading cause of relationships ending, or two acquaintances who have come together and now realize they're no longer compatible? What do you think, in today's world is the biggest leading cause of that? Kirsten, Belaire, and Luna Bean are back on the show. How you guys doing?
We're good. Thank you.
Got a doozy to start out with. We're going to be talking about relationships again, PTSD specifically in relationships.
Yep.
But let's just start out with, in your professional opinion as a counselor for many years now, master's degree educated, what do you think is the number one leading cause of relationships ending, or two acquaintances who have come together and now realize they're no longer compatible? What do you think, in today's world is the biggest leading cause of that?
So I would say first, you can Google some research, right? And then they have some top items that come up. I think that's pretty accurate when it comes to the people that we've served and the families that we've served and helped. One of the biggest things is going to be communication. Communication. But that's such a broad term because, communication can be about a lot of different things that are pretty complex if we peel away some of those layers. However, if we're unable to just communicate well about the hard topics or the complex topics, then we're probably going to really struggle in relationships. But some of the themes that I've seen are, yes, to a degree, expectations that are not in alignment with each other. So I read a book. This was, and I can't remember what it is, but trying to give credit where credit is due. I love this analogy. It was a book on love. And what they said basically was the concept of, if you really want a dog and you end up bringing home a cat, then if you find yourself wondering, why is this cat not being a dog? Why are they not playing fetch? Some cats will play fetch. I know cat owners, but not doing kind of the dog stuff. And maybe this cat is more aloof, or just more self-sufficient and things like that. You end up kind of being resentful. And the truth is that if you want a dog, you need to choose a dog. If you want a cat, you need to choose a cat. And I think that when we think about relationships, whether it's the chemistry or biology or youth or whatever kind of brings us into relationships, we don't always take the time to have the hard conversations about the meat and bones of, are you a dog or a cat? Just for, because we're so variant. I know that it's not just like two categories,
A or B,
but right. But if you're a dog and I'm really looking for a cat, then we're just not a good fit. And it doesn't mean that one is better or worse. It just is not a good fit. And I don't know how often people really do kind of dig in. Then again, I don't know if biologically we're meant to just have all of those hormones so that we actually do pair up, because if we're super picky, we might end up alone. Right. But anyway, no matter what kind of brings us together, it is the navigation of being able to communicate and understand that we're two different people. Right. And if we're not able to do that and figure out collaboratively what would work best in our relationship, we're just going to, hit hard points and potentially points that we can't move beyond. Yeah.
Keep throwing the ball and it will continue to not bring it back because it's a cat. I feel like we slip into a relationship because we want, using your analogy, a pet, but we don't specify to ourselves really what we want in that pet. Right. I feel weird talking about like a spouse as a pet, but it's a good analogy. Right. Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you're a single individual, take the time to identify what your morals are, what your values are, how you make decisions, your hobbies, interests, things like that. And I don't think the common slogan of "you complete me" is really valid. I've never really followed that. Yeah. I want someone who has the same interests. I want someone who has the same beliefs, same values, same morals, so that we can form something together. Instead of "you complete me," it's "I'm whole, you're whole." Now we're creating something that is not attainable alone. Right. So you're creating something even bigger than both of you individually. Right. But you have to take the time to make a list and figure out what kind of pet you want.
Yeah. I know that there's probably a lot of people that make their list, right? Which is good. But it's also did you allow for enough opportunities in the exploration phase of the relationship to determine accurately if that list is getting checked off first? Second, and you mentioned this, like, imagine when you were 22 and the man that was then, is he the same as the man that sits here now?
Physically, yes.
Okay.
Emotionally, mentally.
You're aging really well then. Good job.
Yeah. Physically, emotionally, maturity wise. No, definitely not.
Right. And so the difficult thing sometimes too is that when we enter into a relationship, I've heard a lot of people say, I just want somebody who loves me for me and basically just accepts me as I am, which can work for a short, small season. But the truth is we're ever evolving and changing. And so even when you mention the values piece, maybe some of the values or things that I believed or thought when I was in my early 20s may not be the same as when I'm in my late 20s or early 30s or 40s or 50s. Like, we evolve and change as humans. And so having a growth-oriented mindset for ourselves and for the relationship, I think, is critical to being able to sustain long-term. If not, then usually one person will grow or progress or change. The other person might want to stay status quo or where things were at. And then you just get more and more distance and separation.
That's I want to ask you so many questions about that. I want to stay on topic though, but the question came up was, you know, once you start to hit that 1 year, 2 year, 3 year mark in a relationship, I know, you know, under the 5 year mark is when a lot of relationships fail. But it's like, once you can breach that, you understand how to grow together. You understand how to change beliefs together. Your values may evolve. Your morals may differ as you grow, mature. And I just think when you start to see that change both in yourself and in your partner, that could be scary at first. I've experienced this absolutely in my 20s. But maybe there's something to that, you know, like how do you mature together as a couple into your 30s and 40s and 50s and not see like you're not who I thought you were when that's not a bad thing. You're supposed to be changing. You're supposed to be growing and supposed to be maturing.
Right. And I'm gonna say too, some of the research was saying, you know, a lot of divorces are occurring about year 8, year 10-ish.
Really?
And that sounds, to a degree, pretty accurate. So you're right. You have like this first 1 to 3 years where you still maybe have a little bit of the honeymoon phase to a degree, but then you're starting to get to know them better. And now you're, you know, rubber meets the road, brass tacks. You know, how do you do your dishes? Do you keep the toilet seat up or down? Do you, you know, do you pay your bills on time? Whatever.
How do you deal with family drama? How do you deal with financial issues?
Yes. And so the more time that we have in those first few years, that's where we really get to see, okay, can we navigate this? Can we adapt and evolve through it? And then if they can, then you do feel that sometimes more secure, steady, okay, we got this. But I would say probably, and it makes sense in my head, about that 8-10 year mark is where I think some couples really get to the point where they're like, oh my gosh, this trait or this challenge or this whatever is not changing. Now it's been long enough. Do I want to spend the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years having to do this, whatever it is with that person?
Play fetch.
Play fetch, exactly. Or not play fetch when I really want to play fetch.
Right.
And I think that too are, you know, I know, you know, the culture is changing. And so 100, 150 years ago, I mean, divorce was not a common thing. You didn't really have much of a choice, at least as a woman, to say this isn't working.
For sure.
But men, it was more okay for them to have mistresses or cheat or things like that. It was more socially acceptable, excuse me. Not saying that all did it, right? But there was just this system and this culture, at least here in the U.S., that really seemed to focus in on long-term you stay. And also there's religious and just values that kind of reinforce this one and done, right? But I took this training and I loved what the trainer said. She was explaining that, you know, it made sense when we were living to be maybe 40 or 50 years old, right? Because we had shorter lifespans back in the day. So when you got married, you might be with somebody for 10, 20 years, maybe 30. but that was it. But now we're expecting people to be in relationships for 40, 50, 60 years.
Right.
Not saying that that's not doable. My parents have been married for 60 years, you know,
Wow.
but I think, you know, we don't always think about that in relationship to the choices and freedoms that now we have to move in and out of relationships that are not satisfying us or that are harming us. We can now exit, whereas before, socially, the construct said you don't exit.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're 30, you're 10 years from dying. Why would I leave this? I don't want to die alone. So you just stay in something miserable. But now a 40-year-old can be single and still get married and have a 30-year marriage.
Yep.
Or longer, hopefully.
Yep. And actually, I've known quite a few 40-year-old, early 40s gentlemen who have started families over. Like they have grown kids and now they have 1, 2, 3-year-olds with a new spouse and just a whole nother life.
Yeah, I'm the product of one of those. So I have 3 half siblings.
Yeah.
My oldest brother's 53, I believe.
Okay.
Don't yell at me if I'm wrong. And I'm 32. So different mothers, but it's worked out.
Yeah. Right?
Kind of.
Sure.
But that's a good segue. Like back to the original question, what causes relationships to fail? I do agree that it's communication. I think it's kind of a mindset thing though. Like what is your mindset towards the relationship?
Yes.
Just to tie it into modern society, like if you take complex problems, we have very complex solutions for complex problems these days. Like at the click of a button or however long it takes me to take my phone out and open an app, I can see the weather anywhere in the world. Like that is a very, very complex problem. And we have a very easy solution for that. So now you take that mentality or that mindset into a relationship. We have an argument or my spouse is angry or my spouse is sad. I don't have just an app for that. I don't have a...
Not yet, Lord
Not
knows.
yet. Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
But that's what I mean. I don't think we'll ever have a solution for this. You know, the problem was weather. Now if we have a solution for that. If the problem is the relationship, it's a problem or a project that just continues to develop your entire life. And I think you have to change the mindset from, every little intricate detail of this relationship is not going to be solvable. And it's something that me and my spouse agree to work on for the rest of our lives together. It's a project that you and I are working on together forever. And there's going to be problems within the project that we'll solve eventually, and we'll get better at that. But it's not just one and done. Hey, we fixed our communication problem. Like Google that.
Yeah.
You'll get a million different answers. But if you Google what the weather is in India, you'll have an instant answer. So I just think with culture, with technology, our mindset on relationships are changing also. Yeah.
And I think you pointed out something really important, which is, I'm going to say like distress tolerance, but more so the ability and to hold the perspective that we don't always have to be in alignment if we're in relationship. We can be different, we can be unique, and we can have certain or different beliefs, certain things, right? As long as I have the perspective that I don't need you to be the same as me and that we're fully aligned, always agreeing on everything, then I have a lot more ability and aptitude to just breathe and relax and let you be you and I get to be me. And that takes some, I think, wisdom. I think it takes resilience within yourself and patience to let just certain things go. Like, okay, that person's just never going to fold their socks in a certain way. Can you get over it? Or that person will never view whatever driving the same way that you do. Okay. Can we be different and still align in a relationship and enjoy it? I think so.
Yeah, easy to say. I feel like this is probably one of the hardest parts of a relationship, though, is disagreeing with your partner and still, not letting emotions get too crazy.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Well, okay. So first, I think we need to understand where that comes from.
Right.
So more often than not, especially historically, I would say on average that when you're raised in a family, think about the caregivers or the parents or the foster parents or whoever raised you, right? They had values and beliefs and things that they felt were right and wrong. And basically growing up as a child, you needed to align with them. Otherwise, what would happen?
You'd get yelled at, you'd get punished, go in timeout. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So you are raised in this message when you're doing some of the most intense and amazing growth and development that a person can do. that you need to be in alignment and you need to be in full agreement with certain people that matter, that are important to you or that take care of you. And the other people who are not in their group or their values or beliefs are not okay, or we don't talk to them, or you don't hang out with them, or whatever, right? And so we translate that into our adult relationships where it's like, oh, okay, so if we don't agree, well, somebody must be right and somebody must be wrong, because that's what we were raised to believe, versus both of us could be right, equally right, and we could do it totally different ways, and both of us could be really wrong, right? Wrong, right? See, I'm going to... But... it's just that concept of being, again, to hold space for difference. Now, again, with certain things, for example, when we talk about monogamy or relationships where it's like, I want only one partner, research in the studies will show that, infidelity, sexual issues or whatever contribute to divorces. Well, that makes sense, right? Because if we have, whether a spoken or unspoken contract, and I will say this, I can't tell you the amount of couples that I've worked with over the years where they really had never sat down and were very clear on what was what. And what I mean by that is, for example, what exactly is pornography? What is okay if I watch, like what is okay for me to watch or not watch when it comes to pornography? Is masturbation okay? How often are we supposed to have sex? How are we supposed to have sex? How creative are we supposed to be in our sexual life or allowed to be? Are we supposed to just only be with each other and nobody else? Okay, well, maybe it's inferred sexually, but what about texting or emotional connections with other people or even flirtatious messages? Like, people really haven't sat down and clarified. And I think that there's miscommunication and misunderstanding amongst couples as to what is what.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So again, it's so fascinating to me. I'm just going to throw this out there that one of the most important jobs, in my opinion, this is just Kirsten's world, one of the most important jobs that we can ever have is to be a parent. And we are the least educated and skilled to do so.
True.
Like if we want a driver's license, we have to study, we have to practice, we have to take a written test and a driving test. If we want to get a college degree, you have to take classes, you have to do papers, you have to do presentations, blah, 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 blah. All of this stuff, right? To become all of these things. And yet, in order to become a parent, what do you have to do? One person,
sex.
and one person typically would orgasm.
Right.
Now, again, yes, there's other, fertility ways, but in general, right? We're talking about classic heterosexual sex. But again, do they take parenting classes on this? Did they take early childhood development or development across the lifespan? Did they study parenting techniques, like all this kind of stuff, right? It's so fascinating, again, that it's one of the most important jobs and we're the least skilled up and educated to do that. I think the same thing in a way with relationships, right? Because here we have the most important thing that we could be doing, which is an engagement where we connect with somebody, mind, body, and spirit. And yet, have we really learned the skill of negotiation, of not one-upping and one-downing, or just holding the space? Have we really learned how to communicate, how to hold space, how to reflect, how to witness? No, typically we haven't. What we were taught was from our parents, and if that worked, then we try and replicate it. If it didn't work, we try to not do that. But we still don't know what the fudge we're doing.
Right.
Yeah. That was my little tangent. Sorry.
No, I like it. That was a good tangent. Back to your point about, communicating what is what. What you're describing is communicating expectations in a relationship, which is back to our original point of communication. But I have this idea of where resentment in a relationship comes from, because back to the, sexual needs example, if you don't communicate that I want to have sex 3 times a week, at a minimum, and we need to do these 3 things because that's what I enjoy. If you don't communicate that, uncommunicated expectations results in resentment.
Very good. Yes.
So if I'm not communicating what I'm expecting of you or needing from you, I'm going to slowly, inadvertently, and probably unconsciously build up resentment. And then that's going to come out when the dishes aren't done. But in reality, it's about our lack of sex. And all you have to do is communicate expectations and not be shy, because this is the one person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. And I can't imagine doing that with someone who you're shy to ask, can we have sex?
Right. Well, actually, a lot of relationships experienced that, where one person doesn't feel like it's okay for them to actually voice what they truly want, think, feel, and need, right?
Which is probably a much bigger issue.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I'm glad that was really well said, Taylor. And one of the things too is now, let's say that you propose your needs 3 times a week, certain things, whatever, but then your partner says, well, I'm okay with 3 times a week, but I don't want to do these certain things that you want to do. Then what?
We talk about it. We communicate. We
and
have
we
a
negotiate.
conversation. Yeah.
Yes.
Negotiation. Yeah.
Right? Because hopefully a negotiation or a compromise would be as best as we can get to both of our needs getting met. But a lot of people then maybe they feel inadvertent shame, though the person who's responding isn't trying to shame them. And especially, because we're on this topic of sex, right? But certain people enjoy certain things that other people would be like, oh, and they would have judgment about it, or they fear that they would be judged. Like, oh, you shouldn't do that. I can't believe you would want to do that, whatever. And so if they're already vulnerable in the ask of, I would like to do this one sexual thing, I hope it's okay. Would you like to do that? And the other person has a recoil, like disgust. Ooh, God, no. Like, is that great communication? No.
Because now you've just shamed your partner.
Right. And so it's communication 2-way again, not just us communicating, but us being able to hear and the other person be heard. And it's just a reciprocal thing.
Right. Yeah. We're on the topic of sex, but just in relationships in general, why is it difficult to ask for what you want? There's a lot of like shame involved in that. There's a lot of indecisiveness and kind of insecurity about asking what you want. It doesn't even have to be, about sex, but like, I want to go out with my friends and I want to introduce you guys. And maybe that's hard to ask. Where do you think that stems from?
So, and I just want to point out again that these are way more complex, brilliant questions, way more complex situations. The answer is always going to be, to a degree, it depends, right? Because it depends on the person. But I will say, how you were raised, we're taught very early if it's okay for us to ask for our needs or even have needs. Okay. So if we were raised in a home where our needs were not priority or went unmet, or we were punished for having needs, then typically we're going to find ourselves in a relationship where when somebody asks us, hey, where do you want to go to dinner? We're like, wherever you want. We are others needs focused.
You really want to go to this steakhouse, but you're too scared to say it.
Right. Yep. So we are not even showing up truly in this relationship. So that could be the case. I do know sometimes, and I have been guilty of this, where I say, be honest with me. Tell me what you truly think and feel. But then if you're honest with me, then my feelings get hurt, or I get all an attitude, and then I end up inadvertently punishing you or shaming you for giving me what I wanted or what I needed, what I said I did, at least. Yeah. And I think that this can happen, early in relationships, where let's say that you decided to become vulnerable and you had an ask, Kirsten responded, and it did not feel good to you and you felt shamed or judged, you're probably going to be really reticent to ask again. So maybe you get the courage up and you ask again, but then I'm still not in a place to really receive it well. And so then you get punished again. You're going to stop asking. Right. And then it's going to be 5 years down the road and we're going to be in couples therapy and you're going to be like, well, this is what I've wanted. And I'm like, well, you never said anything. And you would be like, yes, actually I did when we first got together and you shut me down. Right. So I learned very quick. So it's also the system of the relationship that can dictate safety in being able to just share. So it's, do I know myself enough to actually bring myself to the table, be honest, this is what I want, this is what I think, this is what I like, what I don't like. And also, am I safe to be able to express that? And is the other person reciprocally able to share and be safe? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Our relationship is home base. Like that really should be the place that you come home to and you can communicate anything. You can vent about your day. You can cry about your day. You can be excited about your day. Yeah. If you don't have that, it radiates throughout the rest of your life. Yeah. Like at no point should you go to work and complain about your home life. I'm just so against that. Yeah. It like hurts my heart to hear people that do that. Yeah. Like you should be home, love your partner, go to work and bring that excited energy into work, and you're getting shit done all day and you're enabling your coworkers to do good work, and then you come home and now you have home base to relax and be yourself. But if you don't have that, you're not communicating, you don't communicate expectations, you don't communicate emotional needs. I don't know. It's just really important to create that home base with your partner.
I think that's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. That would be so nice if it was operational that way.
If it was that easy.
I will say I've seen couples that were in high conflict once an external crisis occurred. Man, they just congealed together. Like they connected and they became a team to combat whatever was happening externally. And then as soon as that external stuff went away, then all of a sudden they were back at it. There's something about in relationships where it's like, you're my enemy, or I'm going to transfer onto you whatever I'm feeling or experiencing, even if it doesn't have to do with you. And so when you say it should be a home base, I would love to say, oh, yes, I would love for it to be that way for people. However, if I'm coming home and I'm not feeling safe with you, then how does that work? And if I'm saying I don't feel safe and behaviors or responses are continuing to make me feel unsafe, then we're screwed. And then I end up going to work and talking about it, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say as a non-professional counselor, that's not a relationship you should be in.
Right. But
yeah, the whole point is to find someone and be with someone who can do that. And if you're doing your part and communicating like, hey, I really want this to be a safe place. I want to listen to you. I want to be there for you. And I also want the same from you. I actually need the same from you. And through that communication and safety net that we're creating for each other, we're going to create this home base. Yeah. And if you're not capable of do that, I can help you to an extent. But, you know, at year 8, at some point you have to make a decision.
Right.
Because it's, I mean, I don't want to get into that, but it's really easy to make a home base by yourself.
Yeah, fair. I mean, you can.
No one's getting in here.
I know, right?
I've been that person too.
Facts.
Yeah.
I think that really aligns with, for example, people who experience trauma, right? If we're talking about PTSD in a relationship. It's so interesting because first, when we're experiencing PTSD, we have all of this internal turmoil and our brain isn't necessarily functioning the way we want it to, not at its optimal performance, blah, blah, blah. And so we're coming home and we're being asked of or by our family for compassion, witness, energy, love, openness, connection, all this kind of stuff. But when we're suffering inside, it's like, no, I don't have it to give, right? Well, then the family tries to be patient sometimes. Let's say they try to be patient, but then I'm still suffering. And now we're months in, years in, and I'm not doing the work and I'm not making the choices to help myself heal. And then it's just getting worse. And then the family is like, I don't know what to do. And then they start to fight back. This is not always, this is not everybody's story, right? But it now becomes this battle of, I can't fix you. You need to do the work, but are you going to do the work? That's the hardest piece that I see in relationships is one person who's saying they're willing to do the work and they're willing to grow and they would maybe go to counseling or whatever. Like they would do something to salvage this. The other person is, whether it's shut down or defeated or hopeless or resentful enough or whatever, that they're not really engaged in doing the work. And so in couples counseling, we really struggle to get anywhere. If you have one person who's ready and the other person that's not, you can't heal a relationship by one person doing all the work.
Right.
So that's a really just tough situation, is to get both people on board and symbiotically be able to be at that energy level of, like you said, this is a project, this is work, this is something that we get to continue to grow and manifest. And if I just give up and I throw my hands up and I'm like, screw it, we're getting nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. The answer to the problem and the end result of the project is the enjoyment of doing it with a partner. Right. You get to do this together and you get to unfiltered, have a conversation about, hey, I don't know what to do right now. I've never been in this situation. I've never had these, financial situations. I've never been in this, I just lost a family member. Like, you're going to go through things in life with this person that you've never done before. So you can't expect you or them to know what to do, but you can turn to each other and figure it out. So what I was saying, like, I don't want someone that completes me. I want someone who's my equal. And so so we can create something that doesn't exist alone.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a real, like you just said, matching each other in a way, so that it's not one person fixing and the other person is fixing and vice versa. It's really an equal, like you said. And that's the hard thing too, is that when we see our loved ones in distress, there are impulses where we want to fix it for them. And there's some times where that's appropriate and the other person would love for us to fix it. And there's times where they're like, I'm sure when I say this, there's a lot of people listening. They'll be like, yep, totally heard that. But when somebody is like trying to be helpful, trying to support, trying to fix, and the other person's like, I don't need you to fix this. You know?
Yep.
Yep. Oh, okay.
I don't need your help.
Right. I just need you to witness me right now, or just be with me in my suffering. And that's really hard to do, to just be with somebody when they're suffering.
For sure.
It's like almost antithetical to what we want to do, but sometimes that's what they need. And that's exactly what you're talking about, is that figuring out how to be, yes, equal, and negotiate and navigate uniquely for you and your partner.
Right. The Veterans Voice podcast is sponsored in part by Optum and is produced in the Optum Podcast Studio. Optum and Mountain View Medical Group offer 20 clinics throughout the Pikes Peak region. Their primary and specialty care doctors provide quality, patient-centered care backed by Optum's leading health services and technology. They are dedicated to helping our community live healthier while keeping care affordable. Visit optum.com/Colorado today for more information. Let's talk about assertive communication.
Oh, yeah.
What is assertive communication, and how can it slip into 3 different types of communication?
Yeah.
Which you outlined for me the other day: passive, aggressive, and passive aggressive.
Yep.
So 3 different types of communication that are kind of false types of assertive communication. So let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, well, they're definitely not assertive. Well, they could be. Okay. So
I mean, aggressive and assertive kind of are synonymous, but one's toxic.
Yes, fair. So yeah. So if we think about, for example, aggressive communication, this is the fight response. This is the diminishing, loud, swearing, cursing, name calling, fisticuffs, all that kind of stuff, right? Like we're getting it. That's aggressive. And how does it feel to be on the receiving end of somebody who's doing aggressive communication with you? Typically, it's not very pleasurable, unless you're maybe an MMA fighter. I don't know, but for the most part, it's not pleasurable. And so we're going to want to fight back or recoil or avoid or whatever, leave. Like, I don't know, but it's not a good mode. But the other person is like, this is how I get what I want, because people actually defer. They defer to me. It's a one-up move. With the passive is a deference of needs. So I don't have any needs, whatever you want, people pleaser, and just kind of, very, I don't want to say meek, but just not a person who knows how to advocate for themselves.
Or feels that they can't.
Advocate for themselves. Exactly. And so you have that passive piece. Then you have the passive aggressive. And I'm sure everybody listening's probably experienced somebody, or maybe they've done this themselves, where it's, I'm not going to say it to your face, but walking away, I'm going to be under my breath, son of a blah, 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 whatever. Or at the water cooler, I'm going to be bad mouthing you like nobody's business, right? That's kind of the passive aggressive. And a lot of times these are the type of responses that we just step into, and this is what we do. Yeah. However, it's not assertive. Assertive means that we can be firm, we can be clear, we can be honest, we can be real, and we can be kind, we can be compassionate, we can be empathetic. Right? That feels totally different, right? Because now it's not a all or nothing, either or. It's a, I have needs, you have needs. This is what's happening for me. Let's talk about it, or whatever. So assertive is very different. Yeah. And again, depending on the relationships that you're in, assertive or any type of whatever may not work, especially if you're with a more aggressive type of person. If your ask or request isn't in alignment with what they're okay with giving, then they're probably just going to become more responsive, aggressive, and shut you the F down. Right. Boo. Right? So they force you into a passive place.
So where does passive aggressive come from? I feel like this is a common behavior, and I kind of understand it more now with your example there.
Yeah.
Like they're passive in the moment, but then aggressive out of the moment with someone else, or maybe in their own head even. So where does that come from?
Well, it comes from, I think, I would say like the fight response that we have in us, but then the inability, or we're not allowed to actually fight. So we still have to get that out. So yeah, that's where, I'm just thinking about that. And I'm like, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but there's some times where I get hot is what I call it. And I'm angry. And I know that if I was to say something in that moment, first, it probably wouldn't come out well. Second, I could like lose friendships, or I could lose jobs or things like that. Right. But I have that fight. I have that, maybe it's a justice part of me that's like, there was an injustice, fight. This is not okay.
Right.
But if I just give in to that impulse, I may move totally into full aggression. That's not okay. Or I could shut it down and avoid it. That's not okay. I'm trying to wobble between the two. That's the passive aggressive. Well, that's not working either.
Right.
How can I just figure out how to be assertive?
Yeah. Passive aggressive behavior is kind of scary to me in a way. It's like lying. Like, is everything okay? And they just say, I'm fine. And then they go off to their friends and complain for 4 hours about how everything's not fine. Like that's a very scary and preventable behavior. So I really just kind of want to dive into it a little bit, because I know everyone has experienced passive aggressive behavior, if not done it themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that analogy. Guilty. And I've been guilty.
For sure. To some
honestly,
people, like, you still are just passive aggressive though.
to a degree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's because because it keeps me where I want to be in certain places.
For sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. But
like
keeping the theme with relationships though.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because you said it's scary. I think that's valid. And also because you can't trust it. And when we can't trust, and this is where the term two-faced, right, would come in. If you can't trust, then there's not really a relationship. There's just not. There's a sharing of space, maybe, but it's not a relationship. And so it makes a lot of sense where, whether aggressive, passive, or passive aggressive, especially the sense of lying, not being honest, right? However, if I was to be honest in certain situations, to say, I really effing hate you right now. Like, if you want my honesty, that's what I feel.
I love it.
So, well, yeah, you might, but a lot of people might be like, oh my God,
right.
you know? But those are the hard conversations that hopefully we could have the grit to be able to navigate and complete. But I can't tell you the amount of times that it's worth having those hard conversations and I get shut down and then it becomes a one-up or whatever. And we're just not skilled up, I don't think, as well as we could be to be able to be totally, fully honest, transparent, congruent, I think is the other thing that you're talking about. With what I'm feeling and thinking inside is also what I'm presenting to you outside.
That was well said. I just think it's, like I said, a scary behavior that it's almost like a disease that can spread in like a workplace. I mean, I saw it in the military, but you know, you have a boss and he's too scared to have a conversation with an employee who's not acting well or not behaving in a way that's advantageous to the workflow of the company. And so they don't have the conversation, but then he goes and complains to his coworkers or his equals about it. And then that somehow makes it back to the subordinate. And then now there's this tension between them because someone was passive and then aggressive. Passive aggressive. It's a disease.
It can be. It can be.
And it spreads. Interesting.
And it also makes sense in certain systems. So if I'm thinking about the military and I'm thinking about the system of the military, I can't necessarily go up to to the garrison commander and say, hey, by the way, I think you're a DWAD and that you're stupid and blah, blah, blah. Not that we would ever have to say it that way, right? But we can't do that if I'm an enlisted person who's not equal ranking. Even then, potentially we can't. But we still have that. This isn't working. It could be done better. Why are things not changing? Why are we still doing things archaically? But you have no voice. And so you kind of express it and complain about it instead of letting it simmer and stifle inside. And then there's other people who are agreeing with you. Maybe you're, soldiers in arms or whatever in your unit. They're like, yeah, dude, this is stupid. Why do we still do this?
But then when that sergeant major comes around, everyone's like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Everything's perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the craziest
Toxic.
thing is that these people in leadership think that they're pretty awesome, but they don't understand that they have not given voice or allowed honest feedback. They're not feedback informed. They don't desire that. And I think that can be such a beautiful gift in any relationship, especially romantic, is trying to be feedback informed, like on anything. I would love to hear how you experienced that when I said that, or how I did that. I did the dishes. What do you think? And if you're like, well, I mean, this is good, but I kind of like it when it's this way because of blah, blah, blah. And you could be like, hey, that's not a bad idea. I could do that. Or you could say, well, I don't do it that way because of this or that. And then it's just a conversation.
Yeah. People are often triggered by feedback or offended by feedback, but in reality, that's the only way you learn in anything, relationships, skills. Yeah. You want to learn a guitar, and you take it offensively that they're telling you need to do it this way instead of that way, you're never going to learn anything. It's such a self-limiting way to live.
Great analogy. And yes, well said. Well said.
You said not having a voice, and that kind of resonated with me, in the military, but just in anyone's life in general. I think it's pretty common to be in a situation at some point in time, whether it's a parent or a teacher or a partner, to feel like you don't have a voice. How might that show up in a relationship with, maybe now you're with a passive person, you're with a passive partner, and earlier in life you felt like you didn't have a voice, and now you have this opportunity to just let it all out. How might that get a little bit slippery?
Well, first off, I mean, if you're with somebody who would lean more into the passive realm, then if you're now voicing your needs, then whose needs is the relationship focusing on? Well, it's yours. So you might actually get more needs met. We go here, we watch these movies, blah, blah, blah. It's all because you like it. But the other person is now not really having a voice or getting ignored. And so I think that's where it can be a slippery slope. So yes, it's great to be able to have a voice and to start asking, and especially hopefully having those requests heard and responded to well. But again, it should be, I would hope it would be more symbiotic and a flow, because there's also, it's not just the relationship's supposed to be yes all the time. We are allowed to say no. We're allowed to say, I'm not willing to do it that way, or I'm not willing to take the car there, or I'm not willing to blah, blah, blah. Like, that's just a hard no. What do we do next? But you also need a voice to do that. And so if you're saying yes and no because you're the main voice all the time, then this other person it's not a freaking relationship. It's a one-sided morphing of something, but it's not a relationship. And so you're still alone in a way. Like, you share space, but you're not actually in connection. You're not knowing and being known.
Yeah, I was just thinking of an example. When I was in the military, there's a soldier, this was a very long time ago, very quiet, very shy, very passive. He got arrested for domestic violence because he had a very extreme, beat his wife, very extreme case of domestic violence. And it threw everyone off. Yeah. And I was kind of thinking of that example when I asked that question.
Fair. And again, see, it's always going to be, it depends, complex, but that's very true. And we've heard of this in like the psych world, the concept of, and even back in the day, it was called the kick the dog or whatever syndrome, right? Like, the boss yells at you, you go home, you yell at the kids type of stuff, kick the dog. Exactly. Because the idea that somebody is not experiencing your negativity or your punishments, just because they don't say that it hurts, if you hit them, it still hurts. And so they need an outlet for that. And sometimes that's when they go home. And then they take it out on the family. Yeah. Sometimes they take it out on themselves, whether it's depression or self-harm or things like that.
Substances.
Yes. Like, there needs to be an outlet for that. So I'll show this picture where I'm very needless. And then,
Yeah. Huh. Let's talk about the importance of, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but, intentionality in a relationship. So earlier we were talking about the sexual needs example 3 times a week, but further than that, time spent together, vacations, eye contact, touch, intimacy. How important is it to be intentional about those things? Just for example, like a boundary or a rule, maybe we'll have dinner every evening together, no phones, something that simple. But how important is it to be intentional about those kind of things?
I think it's very important to be intentional about connection. For sure.
That's what I was looking for.
Yes, for sure. However that looks, for whatever the couple enjoys and whatever makes them feel most connected. Because sometimes, honestly, it can be, we're going to sit on the couch right next to each other and both play games on our phone. Okay, fine. I mean, if that's what makes you feel connected, great. But it's identifying what does amplify that sense of connection. I will say too, that eroticism is important in a relationship. And what I mean by that is, especially in romantic relationships, because typically when we marry or whatever our person, our partner, we're hoping to do so in order to experience a lot of things, to include sex, right? We are all sexual creatures. And what I find will happen sometimes is I'll pseudo measure the health of the relationship based on their sex life. And that's not always a good answer because there's a lot of complicating factors. But for couples who maybe are not really engaging in sex because they don't have the erotic charge anymore, that's more of it. It's not even just sex, it's just the erotic charge. That is wickedly important. To still feel that connection. And that's where sometimes we do see people who disconnect or stray or whatever, because they just want to feel that erotic charge again. And when we've been together long enough, now it's just the roommate thing of pick up the kids, do the chores, go to work, pay bills, blah, 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 rinse and repeat every single day. But the erotic charge is our playful time, our connected time. So yeah, whatever connection works. And for some couples, it's totally cool to not even have like anything sexual, but to just feel that physical closeness and cuddle. Great.
Yeah. 20-minute massage, 20-minute massage. You turn around, I turn around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being intentional about connection. Very important.
Yep.
We wanted to talk about how PTSD shows up in relationships.
Right.
So let's start with from the observer, from the partner who has a partner who has PTSD. How might they start to see signs of this? Because it's not like someone who has PTSD or has been to war or whatever the post-traumatic stress is from walks around saying it. Right. It's not like it's very obvious, There's some subtle signs.
Yeah.
How might it show up?
So with PTSD, let's just use the classic, combat veteran. So this person is in a relationship and they were one way prior to deployment or combat, and they come back and they're different. They may not feel or notice themselves so different, but the family might, right? And so the family might be commenting and going, "Are you okay? Like, what are you doing?" So some of the things that, and again, everybody's unique. There's so many different variables and observations that one can have. But I think that if somebody experienced something traumatic or witnessed it or lost somebody or whatever, if there are changes, like, for example, that person would typically, as soon as they came home from work, they would want to sit down and BS for like a few minutes before dinner, before they put their feet up and watch TV. Now they're coming home and they're just going straight and putting up their feet up and watching TV. Oh, well, that's different. That can be isolation. That can be avoidance. Sometimes it's, driving down the highway. We had talked about this, and somebody cuts you off. Before, they would have been like, "Well, that was stupid, man. Stupid drivers, blah, blah, blah." And then stating what state they're supposedly from, which is not the state you're living in.
Right.
And now this person might actually rage out. And now they're chasing somebody down or whatever. And you're like, what is happening? So basically, anything that seems out of proportion to the actual stimulus or event. So if kid comes home and just kid is super excited and loud, and potentially before, partner would have been like, all right, I can tell you're excited. Chill out. You're a little loud. Now is going, shut the up. You know, like there's something off. So there's signals, and I can say this, a lot of times the family sees stuff before the person does. Right. And so being able to listen to your family, knowing that sometimes they do know you best. Now, this is in the example of pre and post. However, there are some people who are in relationship with others who have PTSD and have had it before. So they've never known this person without that. So then how do you tell? How can you tell? Well, again, hopefully we would have an idea of what an appropriate or in proportion response would be to certain things. And if somebody's, again, responding way too impulsively or intensely or out of proportion, we might want to just explore that, right? Yeah.
In your example, the combat veteran, how do you think being exposed to death or life or death experiences translates to coping or dealing with regular everyday life? Do you think there's a tie there? Kind of what I'm thinking is this soldier spent 9 months or 12 months in this very overstimulated environment, life or death decisions every single day, just walking to get my food, I could die. And now all of a sudden they're retired and at home and they're just like struggling to do dishes because it's just so understimulating.
Yes.
Is there this thing where maybe this person doesn't know how to turn off that mentality because they were so scared? Because I think this is a fear-based response that they feel like they still need to be that scared. And so then it kind of comes out as anger later down the road. Yeah, absolutely.
Fear and survival.
Right.
I will say that too. It's like this survival mode. But, and I loved the way you said it, like there's not enough stimulation. Well, what sometimes people will do is try and increase stimulation around them to feel better. What they're not doing is the work to be able to bring their autonomic nervous system, right, their central nervous system back to baseline.
So they're bringing everything up when they need to bring themselves down.
Yes. Yes. And so, and again, that was such a great example because if, for example, somebody comes back and they are in that hyper aroused state, hyper vigilant, just kind of always keyed up, then any little thing is going to be, are you supposed to fight, flight, or freeze? Well, in the military, you're taught to fight. So whether it's your 2-year-old or your 6-year-old or your spouse or whatever, if that gets activated, fight is on. And that's where sometimes the aggression can come out.
USAA is celebrating over 100 years of service to our military community. In 1922, it was a group of soldiers that started USAA to insure each other's vehicles when no one else would. Since then, USAA has grown to over 13 million members strong, and through it all, one thing has remained. USAA is still serving the military community and their families. With their launch of Face the Fight Coalition to counter veteran suicide, we are proud to have USAA as a sponsor of the Veterans Voice podcast.
So when it comes to having a partner who's experiencing PTSD, if they are not in a place to go and get the help or do the work to heal and recover, then, like I said earlier, there's not one person who can heal the relationship. It has to be both. And I can say that there's a lot of times where the family member is like, please get help, please. I love you. I want us to work. I want us to whatever. And that person just is not. Then to me, it's like, you know, you need to create safety for yourself, for the kids, because I don't think any person in a family is put there in that relationship to be the punching bag for anybody at any time.
True.
Ever. And so if the PTSD symptoms are getting to a point where people are emotionally, mentally, physically unsafe, and that person is really struggling to see that they have things that are going on that are keeping them from being the human that they long to be, desired to be, or were, that's an issue. Like for anybody at any point, I think it's good to do a gut check and go, am I actually living and behaving in line with my values? Honestly. Because even if I was raised in a house of violence, I'm a combat veteran, all this kind of stuff, and all I've known is fight. My question is, but did I grow up dreaming that that was going to be my life? Is that what I truly longed for? Probably not.
Yeah.
Did I want to be hit as a child? I don't want to hear well, now that I'm an adult, I understand why. No, screw that. Did I want to be hit and abused as a child? No, I probably didn't. So it's out of alignment when that kind of stuff happens. And so when our mental health or behavioral health is negatively impacting our family, I think we owe it to ourselves and our family to do something about it, to heal, to get the help and support that we need, right? And if that person is not, and now I'm the family member, I need to look at my own stuff because I've been in relationships where my own trauma and PTSD would get activated. Well, that didn't help. And so I need to own my stuff and be able to work on myself to where I can still show up as clean and clear in the relationship, to where my trauma isn't triggering their trauma, which triggers my trauma, and then it's just this trauma cycle, right? So yeah, just everybody, I just want to say, and I feel it when I say this, I think everybody deserves to be in a place, in relationships, where they don't have to fear. They don't have to fear for their well-being, fear that they're not good enough, fear the fist, fear the abandonment. Like, that's not, to me, what connection and relationship is intended to do. And so whether it's my stuff that's making it feel that way or the other person's stuff, that to me is a non-negotiable would be, we're going to let it stay this way. That's a non-negotiable for me. And I would hope for more people. It's like the only answer is things are going to change. And I hope that you're willing to change with me. I'm changing with you. Let's get healthy. Let's get better, but not stay stuck. Because everybody suffers when we stay stuck.
Yeah. Well, if you could highlight one portion of this episode, what would be like your overarching?
Yeah. I think the biggest struggle that relationships have is being able to step back from the blame place and step into the ownership place. It's not always, but it seems so much like pointing the finger. Well, if my person didn't do that, if my kids didn't do that, if blah, 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 blah didn't do that. And it's like, if I could just eradicate that and have people show up in relationships where they're going, did I contribute to that? And if I did, how? And what am I willing to do to show up differently? I think that we could have a lot different connection and relationship in this world. Yeah. But that takes grit to be able to own your shit, you know?
Last question, not really related to the episode, but accept yourself and change the world, or accept the world and change yourself? Both.
Really, both. Yeah. Because if I think that I'm powerless, then I'm probably not walking in true self. Meaning if I don't think I can change the world, then we wouldn't have people who advocate and who make policy changes and who gave me as a woman rights. Thank you, ladies, you know. But at the same time, recognizing that I can only do so much, and I can change, like you started out the show with, my perspectives and how I experience this world. Yeah.
Such a good question. I want to ask everyone that question.
I love this question too. You might want to prep them for it depending on who you're talking to. No.
Cool. Well, thanks, Kirsten. This was a great episode. I feel very informed after this, and you always have a ton of wisdom. So thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you.
Yeah. Where's Luna?
See you later.
See you
Passed
later.
out.